Joining us is Charles Ramsey, a CNN law enforcement analyst, former police commissioner in Philadelphia and police chief in Washington, D.C. Cheryl Dorsey is a retired LAPD officer, police sergeant, author of Black and Blue, about a book about her experiences on the LAPD. Sergeant Dorsey, you were a 20-year veteran with the department. You also grew up in South Central. You know the area intimately. What was your reaction when you heard about and saw this shooting?
Well, my first reaction, let me say this first. Let me offer my sympathies to the LA County Sheriff's Department and say that I don't condone violence by the police nor against the police, but for the grace of God, there go I. When I saw this, my first reaction was sadness because, listen, there's a lot of chatter on social media about an eye for an eye. We know that there are reports of internal gangs within the Compton Sheriff Department, particularly. They refer to themselves as the executioner. And so I wondered aloud if this wasn't maybe retaliation for the failure to hold officers accountable, not only in the Compton Sheriff's Department, but nationally, when we see instances of officers using deadly force as a first resort rather than a last resort.
Chief Ramsey, what is going through your mind tonight as you think of the deputies and obviously their families and colleagues?
Well, I mean, I wish the best for the deputies and their families, obviously, but there's absolutely no excuse at all for that kind of action taking place. It's despicable, it's cowardly, it's all those things that people have said. Listen, violence is wrong no matter who commits that violence. And what you saw today, and it reminded me of the assassination of two New York City officers just a couple of years ago. Again, another cowardly act that was committed by an individual, and there's just no justification for it. I don't care if it's about, police reform or anything that has to do with police. Taking another person's life like that in ambush is just totally uncalled for.
Sergeant Dorsey, the Sheriff's Department has offered a $100,000 reward for information. The FBI have also now offered resources. How confident are you they'd find the shooter?
Well, I don't know if the money offered is going to have much to do with finding the shooter. I absolutely believe that eventually this person will be identified either because of witnesses, because of surveillance and other video that may be gleaned from the area, and all of the resources that the Sheriff's Department will bring to bear to help identify and locate this individual.
Chief Ramsey, I mean, how do you view this in the context of the protests that we've seen? Obviously, tensions are high, lines are divided. How does this affect things?
This has nothing to do with the legitimate call for police reform. This is an individual, a criminal, a killer is what you were looking at. And I hope that your viewers and anyone else who sees this or hears about it doesn't confuse the actions of this person with people who are legitimately trying to change the system, because there is no comparison at all. This is a criminal, a thug. He needs to be apprehended. He needs to spend the rest of his life in prison, period. And rewards do help. I mean, when I was in D.C., we had a standing $25,000 reward for anyone giving information on homicides. In Philly, we do $20,000. It helps because it keeps the information going out there in the community.
Sergeant Dorsey, I mean, how widespread do you think the knowledge is of who is involved in this shooting? I mean, in a situation like this, in post-action reports, what is usually is, how widespread is the circle of people who would know the identity of the shooter?
Well, listen, there's no way to know, and there's an assumption somehow that this person is from that community, and we don't know that to be true. This could be nothing more, in my mind, than a distraction from the real problem, from the real concerns, the angst that the Black and brown community has down in South Central with regards to his relationship with the police department. And so while this happened in Compton, and certainly there are issues ongoing with that agency, we don't know if this person nor the ones who showed up at the hospital and with total disregard for those that were under care there, shouting things that were contrary to them getting better. All of that distracts from the conversation that needs to be had. And listen, let's not pretend that there isn't a reason why folks are upset. Officers are not being held accountable, police chiefs, sheriffs, and listen, the fish rots from the head. I'm talking about the president. And it would be nice if he had the same sort of commitment and decisiveness with regards to swift justice in those areas as he does for the person who committed this crime.
Chief Ramsey, it is, things are so polarized that it does get caught up in politics. It's used by, different groups for different reasons, the president being one of them.
Well, listen, I don't want to get it. I mean, we had people out here doing crazy stuff, killing each other and so forth long before politics got involved. You got some violent people out here in the world, period. They will kill at a drop of a hat. And people need to come to an understanding. There are some people who are just incredibly violent, need to be taken off the streets. So what you saw in that video is an example of one of those people. There is absolutely no excuse whatsoever for what that individual did. It had nothing to do with politics, the environment, not just a thug with a gun who tried to commit murder. And thank God those two officers are going to live. But what's the long-term impact it's going to have on them, physically and psychologically? All this violence has to end, period. No matter who commits it, it has to end.
All right. Chief Ramsey, Cheryl Dorsey, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.